Lieutenant Harris sat in the small, cramped cockpit of his scout ship, staring at the blinking lights and the endless void of space beyond. Around him, the rest of his squad, 3 young soldiers and a technician, chattered nervously. They were the first human unit sent into Zelari territory in months, and the odds were not in their favor. Harris, however, felt calm. He had been sent on this mission not because anyone believed in his abilities, but because the high command considered him a joke. They called it a test, but it was really a wager, a cruel game. They wanted him to fail. And yet, in the quiet of his own mind, Harris had already begun forming plans that no one else could see. The Zelari were not monsters, not in the sense that humans might imagine. They were highly intelligent, cold, and calculated. They had built an empire that stretched across dozens of star systems. Their ships were fast, their weapons deadly, and their strategies precise. Human forces had fought them in scattered skirmishes for years, always managing to survive but never winning. Harris did not pretend that this mission would be easy. What he did have, though, was something the Zelari did not expect. A mind that could think in ways their rigid patterns could not anticipate. While others counted ships and studied formations, Harris noticed the details, the small pauses in patrol routes, the slight shifts in energy readings, the tiny but consistent mistakes that repeated themselves like a pattern in a puzzle. "Lieutenant, we're approaching the edge of the Zelari defense grid," said Sergeant Margot, the most experienced of the squad. Her voice carried a mixture of awe and unease. "Sensors are picking up patrol ships everywhere. We should probably wait for reinforcements." "You know what the brass said, this is basically a suicide run. I'm just here because I followed orders." The ships adjusted their positions, scanned in specific patterns, and then moved again. The repetition was almost imperceptible, but it was there. He leaned forward, tapping on the console. "See that?" he said. "Every 27 minutes the patrol pattern repeats. They assume no one is clever enough to notice. That's our opening." Harris could almost hear their thoughts. How could one man in a small ship exploit an entire alien empire's defenses? It seemed impossible. But to Harris, impossibility was just a challenge waiting to be solved. As they approached the first checkpoint, Harris guided the ship along a route that took advantage of the patrol's blind spots. They passed close to an asteroid belt, using its shadows to hide from Zelari sensors. The soldiers held their breath, watching the lights blink past on the main monitor. Every second felt like an hour. And then, without warning, a patrol ship swept past them, scanning where they had been only moments before. Harris held steady. The ship passed without detecting them. A small cheer erupted in the cockpit. "You did it," said the technician, his voice shaking with excitement. We weren't even seen." Every encounter reinforced Harris's belief that they could do more than survive. They could succeed where others had only feared to tread. And success, he knew, was not measured by brute strength. It was measured by cleverness, by the ability to adapt, by the courage to take risks that others avoided. Hours passed. The team moved carefully, slipping past patrols, evading detection, and making minor, calculated disturbances in the Zelari sensor networks. They began leaving subtle false signals, fake readings, decoy movements, and phantom ship signatures. Harris had realized that the Zelari were predictable in their responses. Every alert triggered a standard set of reactions. By feeding them false information, he could manipulate their movements without firing a single shot. Sergeant Margot shook her head in disbelief. "This is insane. You're tricking them, and it's working." "But if we act like unpredictable humans, we can make them hesitate, make them doubt, make them falter." He noted the timing of its patrol patterns, the rotation of its weapons, the blind spots in its shields. "I think I see a way to get past it," he said quietly. "We won't fight it, we'll avoid it entirely, but we can use it against the others." And so far, the unconventional had kept them alive. As they navigated closer to the heart of Zelari territory, the tension in the cockpit grew. Every blink on the sensors, every pulse of light, every shadow in the void became a signal, a clue, a puzzle to solve. Harris's mind worked like a machine, calculating possibilities, testing scenarios, anticipating reactions. He felt a strange calm in the chaos. This was what he was made for. Hours stretched into days. The team survived near misses, tight escapes, and moments where the Zelari came frighteningly close to discovering them. Each time, Harris's careful observation and clever tactics saved them. The soldiers, once skeptical, began to follow his lead with growing trust. They saw him not as a joke, but as someone who could turn the tide of what seemed like an impossible mission. Late one evening, as the artificial lights of their small ship cast long shadows in the cockpit, Harris paused to look out at the stars. The galaxy was vast and silent, yet alive with movement, with strategy, with opportunity. He realized that the Zelari, for all their power and technology, had never faced an enemy who could think like a human, not really. They could anticipate weapons, count fleets, but could they anticipate ingenuity? Could they see the creativity of someone willing to take risks that defied convention? "Lieutenant," said Margot softly, "do you really think we can do this? I mean, survive all the way to the command hub." Harris could see hope returning to their faces. It was a fragile thing, but hope was powerful. And he knew that hope, when combined with careful thought and courage, could move mountains or entire fleets. That night, the ship drifted in silence, surrounded by the quiet hum of distant patrols and the endless twinkle of stars. Harris knew the real challenge had only just begun. The mission ahead would test every skill, every instinct, every ounce of human creativity. But for the first time in years, he felt a surge of confidence that humanity could do more than just survive against the Zelari. They could prevail. By the time the artificial sun rose in their makeshift orbit, Harris had mapped out the next moves, calculated the risks, and prepared his team for the impossible. The Zelari, powerful and unyielding, had never seen anything like a human mind at work. And by the time they did, it might already be too late. The mission, which had begun as a joke, had turned into something far greater. Harris was not just surviving, he was planning victory. And if he succeeded, the galaxy would remember this day, not for the warships or the weapons, but for the human who saw possibility where others saw only doom. As they moved toward the first major checkpoint in Zelari space, Harris gave his team a simple instruction. Observe, adapt, and be ready. Nothing else matters. If we do that, we can change everything. The more he observed, the clearer it became. The aliens were excellent at predictable war, but they were terrible at adapting. "This route will get us past the next 2 patrols," Harris said, pointing at the display. "We move when the first patrol reaches its far point. We won't even show up on their scanners for more than a few seconds." And what if we miscalculate? Minutes later, the first patrol ship came into view. Its silver hull reflected distant starlight. Harris adjusted their course slightly, sliding the scout ship into a shadow cast by a nearby asteroid. The alien sensors swept past them without noticing. The squad let out quiet sighs of relief. "Lieutenant, this is incredible," said the technician. "We're moving through their territory, and not a single shot has been fired." They were moving to eliminate what they believed was a human outpost, but in truth, the base had already been abandoned months ago. "That's our chance," Harris said quietly. "We can create a diversion that makes them think we're an entire armada. If we do it right, we can manipulate their fleet into chaos without firing a single missile." "Are you serious?" Margot coordinated the small ship's movements to match those signals, while Harris calculated the timing down to the second. When the first Zelari patrol encountered the decoy, it reacted exactly as Harris had predicted. Confused, it sent an alert to the main fleet. The larger ships moved to investigate, leaving gaps in their patrol lines. Harris smiled, quietly impressed by the predictable behavior of an intelligent but rigid enemy. By the time the Zelari realized there was no actual human fleet, it was too late. Harris had already maneuvered his ship deeper into the heart of their territory, past ships that would have destroyed any conventional squad. "Lieutenant, this is insane," Margot said again, awe in her voice. "We've just tricked half their fleet into chasing ghosts." No one had faced a ship like that and expected to live. Harris studied the readings. The cruiser rotated its weapons in fixed intervals, creating blind spots at certain angles. Its shields pulsed in predictable waves, and its communication network depended on centralized commands. If he could interfere with that, even briefly, the cruiser would be helpless. "Listen," Harris said, voice steady. "We won't fight it directly. We can't win in a head-on battle, but we can trick it, delay it, and slip past. Watch the timing. Move when it rotates its primary weapons. We'll be ghosts again, but smarter ones." "That's what they don't understand." He moved the ship through the blind spot, invisible to the Zelari for a full rotation of their shields. The team exhaled as the massive ship passed behind them. They had survived again, but Harris knew this was just the beginning. Hours later, they reached the relay station. From a distance, it looked abandoned, but Harris suspected it held critical information about Zelari communications. Using a series of calculated scans, he found a weak point in the network. By transmitting a small, carefully coded signal, he could create confusion in the larger fleet. Ships would hesitate, misinterpret orders, or even turn on one another. "This is it," Harris said. "We're going to show them that humans are not predictable, and that even a small ship can change the course of a battle." False signals, decoy transmissions, and perfectly timed movements sent the Zelari into confusion. The aliens reacted as Harris predicted. Some ships overcorrected, some paused mid-maneuver, and some communicated contradictory orders, causing minor collisions. Harris's small scout ship moved like a shadow through the chaos, unharmed. By nightfall, the Zelari fleet was in disarray. The minor skirmishes Harris had created had drawn ships away from their strategic positions. Communications were jammed with false reports. The aliens were beginning to doubt themselves, unsure where the humans actually were or how many there were. The soldiers in Harris's team were stunned. "We did this," the technician whispered, almost afraid to speak it aloud. "We tricked an entire fleet." The Zelari were still powerful, but now they were hesitant, second-guessing, unsure of what humans were capable of. That hesitation was all Harris needed. During the quiet moments, he thought about the irony. He had been sent as a joke, expected to fail. Yet, through observation, patience, and strategy, he had turned the situation into a victory of the mind. He had no illusions that the war was over. This was only one small victory, but it proved a point. Humans were clever, adaptable, and unpredictable, and those qualities could not be counted on any scanner or anticipated by any algorithm. In the early hours of the next cycle, Harris gathered his team. "We've bought ourselves time," he said. "The Zelari are confused, hesitant, and overextended. That means we can move deeper into their territory, closer to their command network. Every move we make from here matters more than ever. But remember, it's not the weapons that will win this war. It's the way we think, the way we adapt, the way we act when no one expects it." They didn't think humans could use brains over brawn. Each step was a balance between risk and reward, every maneuver precise. The crew had begun to understand what it meant to be human in the truest sense, not strongest, not fastest, but cleverest, adaptable, and brave. As the stars streaked past in the long, silent journey, Harris thought about the days ahead. They would face larger fleets, more heavily armed ships, and unforeseen challenges. But if they kept thinking, observing, and adapting, they could turn even the impossible into the achievable. The Zelari might have ruled the galaxy with strength and order, but they had never faced a human mind willing to take risks, to see patterns where others saw chaos, and to act with patience, cunning, and courage. Harris knew the mission had just begun, but the first step had been taken. The Zelari were beginning to realize that a single human ship could change the flow of events, and as long as they underestimated him, the possibilities were limitless. By dawn, the scout ship reached the edge of a small Zelari system, a cluster of planets orbiting a dim star. Harris studied the fleet patterns carefully. He had learned that the Zelari would repeat the same patrol cycles over and over. That meant he could plan the next phase, a more daring move, a strike that would sow even greater confusion and allow humanity to make a mark where no one thought it possible. Harris leaned back, thinking of the ironic truth. They had sent him as a joke. He was the least experienced tactician in the fleet, they said, the weakest link. Yet here he was, using nothing but a small ship, a small team, and a sharp mind to bend the might of an alien empire. And the war had only just begun. The scout ship drifted silently through the dark space, its small engines barely making a sound. Lieutenant Harris sat at the control panel, eyes flicking from one screen to another. Every blip, every shadow, every flicker of energy could tell a story if you knew how to read it. And Harris had learned how to read the Zelari. He knew they were strong, precise, and confident, but he also knew they were predictable in ways they didn't realize. Their confidence made them careless, and carelessness was a human advantage. "We're getting close to the command relay," Harris said quietly, his voice steady but low. The three other crew members leaned in, staring at the map projected on the screen. "If we reach it undetected, we can send a signal that will confuse the entire fleet. Not just one squadron, not just one sector. We can disrupt their coordination across the system. That's our strength. At exactly 22 minutes, there's a blind spot. We go through there, no one will see us." The first obstacle appeared in the form of a Zelari drone, moving silently across the void, scanning for intruders. Harris studied its movement and realized it was scanning in a fixed, repeating pattern. "We can't outrun it," he said, "but we can trick it. Follow my lead." The drone reacted immediately, turning and chasing after a phantom threat. In that instant, Harris guided the scout ship through the blind spot and past the drone. The crew exhaled quietly. They had done it again, unseen, unhurt. Hours passed as they moved deeper into enemy territory. Harris calculated every move, every signal, every shadow. And then he saw it, the command relay, a massive structure surrounded by smaller defense ships. From a distance, it looked impenetrable, but Harris could see the openings, timing gaps, shield rotations, and sensor blind spots. "This is it," he said. "The real challenge. If we can disrupt the relay even for a few minutes, we can throw the entire fleet into confusion. They won't know what's real and what's fake." They would approach the relay under the guise of an abandoned cargo ship. Harris would then send out a series of carefully coded signals designed to mimic a larger fleet. The Zelari would detect what appeared to be multiple human ships arriving from different directions, forcing them to redirect forces and causing confusion across the system. As they neared the relay, Harris guided the ship carefully, using the shadows of asteroids and the signals of distant satellites to mask their approach. The Zelari defense ships moved predictably, reacting to patterns Harris had studied for days. He timed every movement perfectly, slipping past shields and sensors with the precision of a chess master moving his pieces across a board. Once in position, Harris began the signal transmission. The crew watched in tense silence as the sensors on the Zelari ships lit up, showing multiple intrusions where none existed. Ships diverted from their posts, formations broke, and communication channels filled with conflicting orders. "Look at that," the technician whispered. "They're falling apart. They don't know what's real." They hesitated, miscalculated, and even clashed with each other in their confusion. The tension in the cockpit was thick. One mistake could destroy them all. But Harris remained calm, guiding each movement with confidence. He had learned to think like the Zelari, predict their responses, and then act in ways they could not expect. By the time the Zelari realized the signals were false, Harris had already achieved his goal. The relay was disrupted, communications across the fleet were compromised, and the defense ships were scattered. The aliens were stunned, unsure where the humans actually were or how many ships had invaded their territory. Margot shook her head in disbelief. "I can't believe it. One ship, one small team, and we've done this." Each movement was precise, calculated, and timed perfectly. The Zelari, still reeling from the disruption, failed to notice them slipping away. Hours later, the scout ship emerged from the shadows of an asteroid field. The crew exhaled, a mixture of relief and disbelief on their faces. They had survived the most dangerous mission of their lives, and they had achieved something incredible. Harris leaned back in his seat, looking at the stars. The Zelari were powerful, yes, but they were rigid, predictable, and unprepared for humans who could think differently. That realization was the key to victory. "We've made our mark," Harris said quietly. "The fleet will be confused, hesitant, and slower to react. We've bought ourselves time, and time is everything." The next challenge was even greater, reaching the central command hub, where the Zelari made decisions that affected entire sectors. If they could disrupt it, even temporarily, humanity could gain a significant advantage. But it would require more cunning, more observation, and more calculated risk than anything they had faced so far. As they prepared for the next phase of the mission, Harris gathered his team. "We've seen what we're capable of," he said. "But we can't rely on luck. Every move from here on out must be precise, intelligent, and adaptable. The Zelari will try to anticipate us, but will stay one step ahead. Remember, our strength is not in weapons or numbers, it's in our mind and our courage." "We understand, and we trust you, Lieutenant. You've proven that humans can be more than they think they are." Each step was a balance between risk and reward, every maneuver precise. The Zelari, for all their technology and strength, had never faced an opponent who could think like a human, and as long as they underestimated him, the possibilities were limitless. By nightfall, the scout ship reached the edge of a Zelari system, a cluster of planets orbiting a distant star. Harris studied the fleet formations carefully. The aliens had begun to react, but they were hesitant, unsure of what was real. That hesitation gave Harris an opportunity, a chance to strike directly at the heart of their command network. He turned to his crew. "The next stage is dangerous. We'll be closer to their command hub than ever before. But if we succeed, we can create confusion that spreads across the entire fleet. Every ship, every squadron will hesitate, and humanity will gain a chance we've never had before." Now they were ready to follow him into even greater danger, knowing that their chances depended not on brute force, but on cleverness, courage, and trust in one another. Harris watched the stars streak past the viewport. The war was far from over, but the first steps had been taken. Humanity had shown it could be more than a mere participant in the galaxy. It could be a force that shaped events, not through sheer strength, but through intelligence, adaptability, and daring. And Harris knew that when the Zelari finally realized what they were up against, it might already be too late. The scout ship drifted through the dark expanse, moving closer to the heart of Zelari territory. Lieutenant Harris studied the fleet formations displayed on his screen, noting every patrol, every escort, and every relay point. The aliens were strong, numerous, and technologically advanced, but Harris knew something they did not. Humans could be unpredictable. That unpredictability was a weapon sharper than any blaster or missile. "This is it," Harris said quietly. "We're close to the command hub. The next move will decide everything. And control comes from understanding, predicting, and acting before the enemy realizes what we've done." Harris focused on the relay network. The command hub controlled hundreds of ships, dictating patrols, attacks, and defensive maneuvers. If they could disrupt it, even briefly, the Zelari fleet would be paralyzed. That paralysis could allow humanity to gain an advantage it had never had before. "We'll approach as a single small ship," Harris said. "But we'll make them believe it's a full human fleet. We use deception, timing, and confusion. The more they believe we're larger than we are, the better our chances." As the scout ship moved closer, Harris noticed the first patrols of the central hub. They were heavily armed, bristling with weapons, and scanning continuously. He calculated the timing, the angles, and the blind spots. Every second mattered. Every decision could mean life or death. "Move along the shadow of that asteroid belt," he instructed. "We'll be invisible to the sensors if we stay in the blind spots. Wait for my signal before crossing into the open." When the coast was clear, Harris activated the first phase of the plan, a series of holographic signals designed to mimic the presence of multiple human ships. The sensors on the Zelari ships lit up with false readings, showing phantom vessels moving in coordinated formations. The aliens reacted immediately, sending commands, diverting forces, and preparing to engage what they believed was a large human fleet. "Look at them," the technician whispered. "They're overreacting, completely overreacting." But strength without clarity is weakness. "Lieutenant, this is incredible. One small ship and the entire hub is in disarray. They don't even know we're here." But he had noticed a gap in the energy field, a brief window that opened every 38 minutes. During that time, the shields on one side weakened slightly, enough for the scout ship to slip through if timed perfectly. 30 seconds until the window," Harris said. The crew tensed, every hand poised. "Get ready. This is the critical moment. If we make it, the hub's communications will be ours, if only for a few minutes." The hub systems briefly detected the intrusion, but it was too late to react. Inside the shielded zone, Harris initiated the next phase, sending a series of encrypted signals that mimicked a full fleet's arrival. The Zelari command network interpreted the data as multiple ships converging from every direction. Orders were misread, commands were delayed, and entire squadrons hesitated. The hub's own defenses turned against itself in confusion. "It's working," whispered the technician. "They're panicking." The Zelari fleet flailed in response to phantom threats. Some ships moved into dangerous positions, others collided, and a few were temporarily disabled by their own miscommunications. Harris's small team remained undetected, carefully navigating the chaos they had created. Suddenly, a Zelari patrol ship appeared directly in their path. Harris acted quickly. He initiated a secondary signal, creating a false reflection of multiple ships moving in the opposite direction. The patrol diverted immediately, giving the scout ship enough space to slip past. The crew exhaled collectively. "Lieutenant, this is insane," Margot said. "We're deep inside their hub, controlling their fleet with nothing but deception. It's influence. They're still capable of fighting, but we've made them doubt themselves. That doubt is what gives humans an advantage." Entire sectors delayed attacks, retreated, or repositioned unnecessarily. The hub itself remained operational, but its efficiency was shattered. "This is it," Harris said quietly. "We've bought humanity time they desperately need, but we can't stop now. We must maintain pressure until they realize the humans are unpredictable, relentless, and clever." As they moved away from the hub, Harris reflected on the situation. Humanity had faced powerful enemies before, but never like this. The Zelari relied on technology, numbers, and rigid strategy. They had underestimated humans because they had assumed humans were predictable. That assumption had been their greatest weakness. By the time the scout ship cleared the outer defenses, Harris allowed himself a moment to relax. The Zelari fleet was still confused, their command network partially disrupted, and their forces scattered. They had underestimated the power of ingenuity, patience, and strategic thinking. Margot finally spoke, her voice a mix of awe and disbelief. "We did it. We really did it. One small ship, and we've shaken the Zelari fleet." Harris knew this was only part of a larger mission. The war was far from over, but humanity had demonstrated something important. They were capable of changing the course of events not by sheer strength, but by thinking, adapting, and daring where others hesitated. By nightfall, the ship reached a small asteroid belt to hide and regroup. Harris gathered his team. "We've shown them that humans are clever and unpredictable. We've disrupted their command network, bought time, and forced hesitation across their fleet. The next stage will be even more dangerous, but this success proves that we can succeed even against overwhelming odds. Our advantage is human ingenuity, and we cannot waste it." The war was far from over, but for the first time, humanity had more than hope. They had demonstrated skill, strategy, and intelligence that the Zelari could not anticipate. And when the final confrontation came, they would not only survive, they would fight in a way the enemy had never imagined. Harris looked out at the stars, thinking about the days ahead. The next mission would take them even closer to the heart of Zelari territory, where the stakes would be higher and the risks greater. But one thing was certain. As long as humans relied on creativity, courage, and cleverness, they would always have an edge. The scout ship drifted silently through the asteroid belt, a small vessel with a small crew. Yet in that small ship, a human mind worked tirelessly, planning, observing, and preparing. And in that mind lay the hope of an entire species, capable of turning a hopeless war into a victory that no one would forget. The scout ship floated in the silent expanse, approaching the heart of the Zelari fleet. Lieutenant Harris sat at the control panel, calm and focused, while the rest of his crew prepared for the most dangerous stage of their mission. They were no longer just a small team sent as a joke. They were the spearhead of a plan that could end the war before sunset. Harris studied the displays. The Zelari fleet was vast, but already weakened and confused from the disruptions he had caused in the command network. Ships hesitated, formations wavered, and patrols drifted out of position. The perfect opportunity was here. If they acted decisively, the entire alien armada could be forced into surrender without a single massive battle. "Lieutenant, we can't fight all of them," Margot said quietly, her voice tinged with fear. "Even with the confusion, there are hundreds of ships. We'll be destroyed instantly if they focus on us. I'll show them it comes from ideas and courage." Harris activated the first phase, a massive display of holographic signals, simulating the presence of a full human fleet converging from multiple directions. Zelari sensors lit up with phantom ships, some appearing to advance from behind, others from above or below. The alien commanders immediately began redirecting their squadrons, unsure which threats were real. "Look at that," the technician whispered. "They think we're huge, they don't even know we're just one ship." Minor skirmishes erupted among their own forces as confusion spread. The aliens, confident in their power and strategy, were now trapped by their own assumptions. The crucial moment came when Harris calculated the perfect timing to strike at the central command hub. Using a small burst of the scout ship's engines, he moved into a narrow gap in the defenses, unnoticed by the majority of the fleet. Once in position, he sent a carefully coded signal that mimicked a massive human armada issuing an ultimatum: surrender or face complete annihilation. The Zelari fleet froze. Their sensors detected the fleet everywhere. Communication channels buzzed with conflicting orders. Commanders argued, unsure whether to retreat, attack, or hold position. In the center of it all, the main hub struggled to maintain control, but the signals Harris sent were precise, timed perfectly to exploit every weakness in their network. Margot stared at the displays in disbelief. One small ship, one mind, and they're all frozen. They can't move. It's like they're paralyzed. They can't predict creativity, improvisation, or courage, and that's why we win. The war, which had raged for decades, was ending in a single day, through wit, strategy, and human daring. Harris maintained the illusion until nearly every ship had submitted to the ultimatum. Only then did he retract the holographic fleet, revealing the small scout ship at the heart of the operation. The aliens were stunned. Their surrender was complete, and they were forced to accept that the humans they had underestimated were far more capable than they imagined. Margot let out a quiet laugh of relief. "I can't believe it. One small ship, and we ended the war before sunset." That's how humans survive and win when faced with impossible odds. Humanity, once underestimated, had proven its strength not in firepower, but in thought, adaptability, and daring. As they returned to human space, the crew reflected on the journey. They had been sent as a joke, underestimated, and expected to fail. Yet through observation, calculation, and cleverness, they had changed the course of history. They had turned a small scout ship into a decisive instrument of victory. Harris looked out at the stars, thinking about the irony. The very qualities that others had mocked, human ingenuity, courage, and unpredictability, had won the war. They had done what no fleet of ships or army of soldiers could have done alone. The human mind, with its creativity and determination, had proven its power. The team returned to Earth as heroes. The commanders who had doubted Harris were humbled. They had underestimated the one human who saw beyond the obvious, who trusted in observation and courage, and who refused to let fear dictate action. Harris had shown that humans could do more than survive. They could shape the fate of the galaxy. At the reception, civilians and soldiers alike marveled at the story. Harris did not boast. He explained simply, careful observation, understanding the enemy, and trust in your own mind and in your team could achieve what seemed impossible. Humanity had proven itself capable of winning against impossible odds, and the galaxy had taken notice. As the sun set over Earth, Harris stood quietly, reflecting on the journey. A mission sent as a joke had ended with a decisive victory before the day was over. The Zelari fleet, once feared across star systems, had surrendered. Humanity had survived, adapted, and triumphed. The day belonged not to weapons or numbers, but to courage, ingenuity, and the strength of a human mind. Harris smiled as he watched the sun sink below the horizon. The war was over. The galaxy had changed. And humanity, underestimated for so long, had proven that its greatest weapon was itself.